is, I think, is going to be very interesting. Um, we need to make a statement at the beginning because I know when lawyers speak, there's always different point of view. And we are not responsible, does not speak on behalf of the Islamic Center as we see it with every talk. And Mr. Adler's talk is the same. These are personal view, but he studied it very, very carefully, and that's what he is going to present to us. Now, Mr. Adri, for those who don't know him, he's a very unique guy because you can tell without any indication that this is Jim Adri. He's unique because he looked different than the rest of us.
Thank you very much.
He, yeah, he will get along very well with the Trump and company.
Oh, boy.
But he is one of us. He was born and raised here. His late father and mother have been active in the Islamic Center right from day one. And they produced Jim and Kathy Hamoud. And they both have been active. I know I met Jim in 1975. And when he graduated from law school and he started his practice officially in 1976. From day one till today, Jim Adri has been both on the council, on various committees. He acted as legal advisor to the council, acted legal advisor to the board of trustees. And he worked on all of the regulations that we probably have. We'll start with the Constitution. He has been active in it. I see Dr. Yes, is here who also worked on the Constitution, Dr. Babu Sheikh. And Jim continued to be the link to any modification of the Constitution. And he is now a member of the newly formed Constitution and Policy Committee that is headed by Dr. Mahjoubi Islam. And actually Wednesday, I think we have a meeting. So we are proceeding as quickly as we can to address issues that are of concern to the community. So Jim today will speak on this end-of-life care and durable power of attorney. I think everyone is somehow, sooner or later, will be involved in this. And I'm glad to welcome Mr. Jim Adri to teach us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow. I hope I live up to my billing. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam.
I don't know if I'll need this or not, but okay. We're going to talk about end-of-life care and durable powers of attorney and living wills. But I want to put my disclaimer up, and I want everybody to understand that the views expressed in this discussion are those of the author, me. A partial bibliography will appear at the end to represent what my research, part of what my research entailed. I have for distribution copies, I guess I can take this, of living wills and durable powers of attorney. I don't know, Sarah, you want to separate them? They're two stacked, or and for those of you interested, you can look at them, because I think it's important to understand from this perspective that these documents are documents that have been approved by the Ohio State Bar Association and the Supreme Court of the State of Ohio. And they represent what the government thinks is appropriate for these. Nothing herein should be construed or interpreted as representing the policy of the center or any other Islamic institute. I put that in there, and I'll tell you why. Because there is some consensus that's developed in the United States and in some Islamic countries with respect to end-of-life decisions. Let's start with belief and duty, because as Muslims, we understand belief. Belief in God, belief in the prophets, the Day of Judgment, and so on. What is belief? I have crystallized in my life belief to mean the willingness to act. If you believe in God, you will act as God has prescribed, as you believe in God. He's given us the practices that we should adopt. So if you truly believe something, you're willing to act upon it. You're willing to go forward with it. I'm talking about, hopefully, believing in positive things and not negative things. People who believe in the shaitan probably practice shaitan worshiping, but they believe in it. All right. A belief is not neutral. A belief is something that you act upon. You can't say, I believe you're right and I believe you're wrong. Right? They're mutually exclusive. Duty, and this is where religion comes in. This is where the law comes in. Duty is an act or a course of action that is required of a position, social, custom, law, or religion. It is required action or service. Allah has said to us, we pray 5 times a day. That's a mandate. He says we fast during the month of Ramadan. That's a mandate, if you're capable. He makes exceptions, but you have to fall into the exception. We're supposed to give alms. We're supposed to believe in the last day of judgment and conduct ourselves as though we're going there and we're going to be judged. A belief or a duty is also a moral or legal obligation as imposed by the law or the society. It's your duty to tell the truth. It's your obligation and duty to operate your vehicle within the speed limits. And you feel a compulsion to meet that duty. Anything in society needs to be put in context. All right? Context is the background, environment, setting, framework, or surroundings of events. I can't even read it. It's too small. Or occurrences. Context, when you talk about something, is the background upon which events occur. You have to have context to understand what the true meaning of something is. And I'm not talking necessarily about language. I'm talking about, let's say you see 2 people standing there and they're raising their voices at each other. You have to put that in context. What are they talking about? Are they brothers? Are they talking about a sporting event, or are they talking about different beliefs? You have to have that context in order to gauge the behaviors. All right, it is necessary for writing to provide information, new concepts, and words to develop thoughts, the course of the discussion and the development of new thoughts, attitudes, norms, and mores. And I want to divert here for just a second. In Islam, euthanasia, whether it's direct, indirect, voluntary, or involuntary, is absolutely forbidden. Suicide is absolutely forbidden. We understand that. But the conversation about end-of-life decisions has started to take its discussion and its flow from Muslim Americans, especially Muslim American physicians and nurses, because they were faced with the dilemma when treating people wanting to end their life or wanting to be taken out of their pain or wanting not to go through unnecessary and futile medical treatments. So the question became, what does a physician do? What does a nurse do? How do you counsel a patient? And we're talking about not necessarily Muslim patients. We're talking about non-Muslim patients. What do they do? How do they handle that situation? When you think about it, if you believe that euthanasia and end-of-life decisions and anything like that are verboten, in other words, forbidden, and you're a practitioner of medicine, or you're a practitioner of nursing, you would advise against those things. You would even say, my belief is that that is wrong. And that may influence the patient. It's the perspective of the patient that has taken this conversation to the levels of which we're discussing it now. The legislatures have discussed it, and it's been brought on by the physicians. Correct or incorrect?
Correct.
So what started out or starts out as a conversation about how to counsel and advise patients and individuals turns into a conversation of what does my religion say about that? Does my religion allow that? What does it allow and what does it not allow? In discussing the application of law or religion, context, as I said, must be fully understood. So I hope I've given you some understanding of the context in which these conversations have occurred. The concept of urf, sorry, Fatma, I didn't mean it to blurt like that, in Islam is the practice of community. It must be measured by Islamic jurisprudence and the country, state, town, or where you live. An example, let me give you an example. We live in a rural community somewhere, and we have a speed limit that's 75 miles an hour down a country road. You take that same strip of land or strip of road and you put it into a residential area, you can't go 75 miles an hour. You observe the custom and the limits, which is probably 25 miles an hour, so nobody will become injured. The same can be said of laws. Laws have to be practical and applicable in the general community. If they want to pass a law, and I'm going to use abortion, which is forbidden. That's the German. I'm integrating this between Arabic and English and German. It's verboten. It's forbidden in Islam. The conversation about abortion in this country is what? It should not exist, and it should exist. That's the conversation, that's the argument, that's the fight, that's what we're seeing out here. But I think everyone's losing context on that. And I'll tell you why. Because people who want to forbid abortion say that life starts at conception, and to take that life or to take that embryo is murder. the people on the other side who want abortion and they want abortion available do not frame it in terms of life or death. They frame it in terms of choice. So you hear people say, I'm a woman and I have a right to determine what's going to happen to my body. I'm a woman and I have a right to decide if I want to bear a child or rear a child. Now wait a minute. Put it in context. Come back over here. It's life. You didn't make that life alone. There's a man involved, generally, or insemination. Again, we have to talk about man and woman and the development of law with insemination and same-sex marriages, but again, context. So the focal point on one side is, when does life begin? And the answer seems to be at the time of conception. On the other side, they want to talk about choice. I have a choice. Well, maybe, and I put this as an aside, this is my statement. Maybe you should have thought about that before you committed the acts that allowed you to get pregnant. Just saying. The Quran has the injunctions, and they're very clear about life and taking life. Take not life which God hath made sacred, except by way of justice and law. Thus doth he command you, that ye may learn wisdom. Take that apart. The sanctity or sacredness of life is something we have to observe in Islam. But you can take life by justice and the law. So if someone murders someone, a concomitant penalty is the death penalty, or can be the death penalty. Then you make that adjustment. Islam considers all forms of life as sacred. However, the sanctity of human life is accorded a special place. The first and foremost basic right of human being is the right to live. Again, back to abortion. That's a human being. That person has, that entity, whatever you want to call it, person, entity, has the right to live. Nobody focuses on this side about choice, about the right of the embryo to survive. That's what the people over here who oppose abortion talk about, the right and the sanctity of life. If anyone slew a person, unless it be for murder or for spreading mischief in the land, it would be as if he slew the whole people. And if anyone saved a life, it would be as if he saved all of the people. All right. The context again. There are other verses in the Quran that emphasize that our lives will end at a predetermined time known only by Allah. I would say to my children when they were young, and I will say to them now, we're all born with an expiration date given by Allah. And it's on the bottom of our feet, and we can't see it. But it's there. It is not given to any soul to die, but with the permission of Allah at an appointed time, the end of life. And no person can ever die except by Allah's leave and at an appointed term. These are two notions, the sanctity of life and life will end at a time that is predetermined by God, are two basic beliefs. Oh my goodness, I made a mistake. Beliefs should be beliefs in Islam that we will make the base to judge the end of life decisions. That's the only mistake I made today. I'm really happy. Salah didn't tell you that I'm also known for my attempts at comedy. Now, thank you. We ordained for the children of Israel Bible that if anyone slew a person, unless it be for murder or spreading mischief in the land, it was be as if he slew the whole people. And then the injunction against suicide. Do not kill yourselves, for verily Allah has been to you most merciful. Take not a life which Allah has made sacred. Interestingly enough, if you read that passage, it kind of dovetails into what Fatmi al-Hayani said last week about the evolution of laws and the hadith and the Quran, that the Quran mentions the people of Israel. The Quran talks about that, and that is the word that is directly from that surah and that verse. All right. We're talking about healthcare decisions now, at the end of life. Durable powers of attorney for healthcare are effective for healthcare decisions, which are defined in the revised code. So the legislature, based on discussion, based on evidence, based on hearings, scientific hearings, has authorized the use of the durable power of attorney. It's an informed consent. You cannot, refusal to give informed consent or with withdrawal of informed consent to healthcare, and healthcare defined in the other chapter, it's defined as any care, treatment, service, or procedure to maintain, diagnose, or treat an individual's physical or mental condition or physical or mental health. Again, back to the doctors. This is exactly the clarification that they needed, because for a long time, historically, people were saying these things to doctors, and doctors were saying, I can't do it. I'm not going to do that. I can't withdraw food and hydration. I'm not permitted to do that. If I do, you'll, quote, sue me, end quote. That's the terror of all you doctors, that you're going to get sued. So from a societal standpoint, community, these are permitted. It's permitted to have a durable power of attorney. I've given you an example of what a durable power of attorney for healthcare looks like. What this amounts to is a declaration by you that if you are unable to make that kind of decision, if you're in a coma, if you're in a permanent vegetative state, if you are unable to talk, that you designate someone who can make that decision for you. When you talk about end-of-life decisions, we're not necessarily talking about immediate death. We're talking about, should you insert a feeding tube? Maybe that'll work. Maybe that will revive this person and allow that person to have sustenance for a period of time so the brain or the body can heal. So you're allowing that individual to make those decisions for you. In Ohio, you're permitted to nominate 2 people. Generally, when this is done, you nominate, the spouses nominate each other. And the secondary nominee is generally one of the children or a close relative. I have found in my experience that parents who do this tend to favor as the secondary nominee a person who's got some medical background, a nurse, a therapist, a physician, people who would be in the know. But what really happens? What really happens, and I think Dr. Sheikh and Dr. Islam can support this, what really happens is you make a determination and you come to the family and you say, these are the facts. This is the science, this is the evidence, this is what we think is going to happen. Is there going to be a recovery? I can't say 100%. Is there going to be a death? I can't say 100%. What I can tell you is these are the facts. And what happens at that point in our society generally is the family makes a decision. So what good is a durable power of attorney? Well, a durable power of attorney is good in the sense that it gives the family knowledge and information about what that person would have wanted. But dad doesn't want heroics. Mom doesn't want heroics. Dad doesn't want a feeding tube. Dad doesn't want to live in a permanent vegetative state, etc., etc., etc. So what it doesn't create a mandate. Nobody's going to get sued over that. It protects the doctor, but it also gives the family comfort in making that decision because they say, we are fulfilling a legitimate wish of our parent or our close relative or whatever. Again, we need to understand, these are not mandatory. They're permissive. A living will, on the other hand, as contrasted to a durable power of attorney, is your statement, me, this is what I want. As most of you are probably aware, when you execute a will, your last will and testament that disposes of your property, it doesn't take effect until the time you die. So it's what we call executory. A living will is a statement while you are alive, while you are competent, of what you want to happen. If you're in a vegetative state, if you're comatose, if you're in a situation where you're not going to recover. And it's governed by all of these statutes. Okay? It protects the physician, it protects the family, it protects caregivers, because you manifest your intention. You create your will, and you say, well, I want my house to be sold when I die, and I have 5 children. I want the property to be sold and the money divided among the 5 children equally. You do the same thing with a living will, but it doesn't need your death in order to take effect. You say, this is what I want. I do not want to be in a vegetative state. I want, if there are 2 doctors or 3 doctors that say I'm not going to make a recovery, I want to be let go. No heroics. Okay, I'm not saying kill me. What I'm saying is, give me a DNR, a do not resuscitate. Don't give me food or hydration, or don't do any spectacular things to keep me alive in that state. That's what you're saying. Ooh, how did we get there?
Going backwards.
I know. Gotta figure this out. Help, Sarah. I thought there were more.
There.
Well,
Yeah, I'm gonna do that.
I'm gonna ad lib it. I got it. Yeah.
There are only 5.
Well, I didn't put everything on the slides. Is that what you're telling me?
Correct.
All right. All right. We've said active euthanasia is absolutely forbidden. Involuntary euthanasia, voluntary euthanasia, absolutely forbidden. Well, okay, between what? Involuntary euthanasia is often euthanasia conducted on a person who is unable to express an opinion due to lack of capacity. That's why you have a living will and a durable power of attorney. You cannot make those decisions. No one's going to say, well, we're going to let this person die. Would you make that kind of decision? Would you? Any physician in here? Sophie? No, I don't think so. Those are not the kinds of decisions physicians make. From the Islamic perspective, in congruence with the doctrine and sanctity of life, as enunciated in the Sharia and the Quran, all forms of active euthanasia, be it voluntary, non-voluntary, involuntary, are the equivalent of suicide and therefore murder and are forbidden. Human life is sacred and it should never be wasted except in cases of specified in the Sharia and the law. An individual should not take an active part in terminating the life of an individual except certain limited circumstances that are beyond the scope of this discussion. That's where the physicians and the nurses and the healthcare providers saw the problem and said, we have to do something about this. We have to know what our religion is going to allow us to do or not allow us to do. The question becoming, are we participating in the taking of a life of a person? All right.
Jim, do you want to define euthanasia so the audience knows?
Sure. Active euthanasia occurs whenever positive and deliberate steps are taken that result in death, such as injecting a legal dose of medication into the patient or where the doctor assists the patient to bring about his or her death. Maybe you'll remember Dr. Kevorkian, our Armenian friend from up around Detroit. Dr. Kevorkian, known as Dr. K or the Doctor of Death, ran around in his 1970s styled van and he would assist people in ending their lives. He went to prison for it. He got away with it for a number of years, and then he made a fatal mistake. Just like these kids who do selfies now that prove where they are and show different things. He taped one of them. He taped an actual death that he performed. That tape made its way to the prosecutor's office. The prosecutor then said, aha, we can prosecute him. They prosecuted him, convicted him, he went to jail, he came out of jail and he said, I haven't changed my mind about this. What he essentially did toward the end of his life is say, I started the conversation about how this can happen or why this should be an option. Again, we're identifying options for people.
What's the role of the clergy here?
The what?
The clergy.
Well, the clergy is as confused as the nurses and the doctors. Because if you talk to an imam, you might get one opinion. If you talk to another imam, you get another opinion. When you talk to a priest, a Catholic priest, it's forbidden. Euthanasia is forbidden. Euthanasia, by the way, is forbidden in all of society. But when you're talking about the role of the priest or the role of the clergy, it is governed in a large measure by their education, their training, and their understanding. So, Catholic priests oppose abortion, and the few that don't oppose abortion, or the nuns that don't oppose abortion, are ostracized. They're taken to task by the Pope. They're taken to task by their own religious hierarchy. I know of no case where any clergy would authorize or say euthanasia is acceptable. Passive euthanasia occurs where there are available measures to prolong life and they're withheld or withdrawn. Or in other words, no positive action is taken to extend the life of the terminally ill patient. This includes not commencing treatment if it's considered futile and not help to improve the patient's condition, discontinuing life support systems, discontinuing medical treatment necessary to sustain life, or withholding a supply of fluids and nutritional feeding. All right. So the issue came up among Muslim physicians and nurses and healthcare professionals. What do I do? If I don't do these things, is what I'm doing haram? Am I violating God's laws? Am I violating those rules? The conversation focused on that and has focused on that for probably the last 30 years, that part of it. The general consensus and the majority general consensus of the Muslim scholars is that that's permitted. You are permitted not to invoke life-saving measures on behalf of a client, of a patient. Now, the doctor's going to get some comfort if there's a durable power of attorney and a living will too, because he's going to say that's the patient's desire. That's what the patient wanted. All right, that's an informed consent. I'm not going to engage in that behavior. But imagine you're a physician, you're treating a patient. That patient, you don't know what's going to happen with the patient. You think the patient's going to die. Do you put the patient on the respirator or not? If you don't put the patient on the respirator, what are the consequences? If you do put the patient on the respirator and revive him, what are the consequences? Are you permitted to just stand there and not do anything? And the general consensus is among the medical professionals, the scholars, the jurists, and the ulama is that you can do that. You do not have to actively engage. Voluntary euthanasia refers to a situation when euthanasia is requested and consented to by a competent person. Now, voluntary euthanasia, I think it's Oregon, the state of Oregon, not the city. But the state of Oregon permits that. And I think if you recall 2, 3, maybe 4 years ago, there was a young lady who went from California to Oregon. She was very young, but she had a terminal illness and she wanted to end her life. And she went to Oregon. She took up, I don't think a residency, but she had a place to stay. She had her family come and surround her, and they had their goodbyes and their conversations, and then I think they gave her a pill, and she died as a result of the pill. That's voluntary euthanasia. I don't see a great movement anywhere to allow voluntary euthanasia. Generally, when you get into something like that, it's going to be what they call suicide. People will do it themselves. Did I sufficiently define it? Okay.
So what would the difference be between the girl who took the pill, euthanasia, suicide? What's the difference? Is there a difference?
Well, the one is assisted by the physician. That's voluntary euthanasia.
But the girl took the pill.
Yeah.
Was that assisted by the physician?
Yeah. He had to prescribe it and give it to her. No. It was perfectly legitimate in Oregon, and the physician was by her side, gave her the pill or the liquid or whatever it was, and he stayed there till she passed, and then he pronounced her dead. Now, that's not generally accepted in other jurisdictions in this country, and I don't think it's ever going to be. I shouldn't say ever. I don't think it's going to be in the lifetimes that are represented in this room, from the youngest to the oldest. Pardon? Is there a question? Okay. With the durable powers of attorney and the living wills, it's critical to understand that these are decisions that are being made by individuals. And like anything else, when you make a decision, such as a disposition of your property, it has to be knowing and intelligent, and you have to have the capacity, the mental capacity in order to make that decision. In other words, a person who's mentally ill probably doesn't know how to make competent decisions. A person who's in a coma doesn't know how to do that. A person who is on drugs or in a heightened state, what do you call that when somebody's...
Intoxication.
Intoxication, yes. Very simple, yes. An intoxicated person can't make that kind or those kinds of decisions. As a safeguard, when making those decisions, you have to have witnesses to your document, to your signature. You have to have a notary to your document and your signature. So there is a check and balance imposed by the law that says, wait a minute, you know, Jim executed this, but I don't know when he executed it. And I don't know what condition he was in. But if I execute it in front of Zuhair and Salah, and it's notarized by Sarah, there are 3 people there that can attest to my capacity at the time I executed that document. And they can say, yeah, he was competent. We talked to him. We sat there for an hour and we talked about whatever. When I do that kind of examination of my clients, which is just a very cursory competency examination, I am nowhere near the skill that neurologists and doctors and everyone else have. But I sit down with the guy and I say to Mike, I say, hey, you got Ohio State cap on. I thought you were a Michigan fan. And he's going to look at me and we're going to talk about it, aren't we? Yeah, you're not crazy. What do you mean you're not crazy? Well,
You're not.
so we're going to engage. With my clients, I do age-appropriate things. Who's the president? Who's the president? The United States. All right? Well, is it Mr. Biden or somebody else? What's your favorite sports team? If you know something about the family, is your oldest daughter doing? The last time we spoke, you said that she was on a trip somewhere. Did she enjoy it? Or because it's you and I know you went to Iran, I might want to engage you in a conversation about something interesting that happened there. And I make my note or notes, say, yeah, he was competent. We had a conversation. We talked about this.
We have 12 minutes. Do we want to open it up?
12 minutes? That's all I have.
Yeah.
And I was worried when I did this that I wasn't going to fill an hour.
Do we want
As unaccustomed as I am to public speaking, understand that these are permissive documents. All right? My conclusions. Don't anybody walk out of here and say that this is from the center or Sarah or Salah or Abdul Wahab. These are my conclusions. And you can agree or disagree. The discussion and execution of these documents is based upon another Islamic legal maxim. Necessity is measured in accordance with true proportions. Unlike modern interpretations of the concept, the inviolable sanctity of life in Islam does not exist intrinsically. The sacredness of this doctrine is since Muslims believe that everything belongs to Allah and life is a gift on loan which has been entrusted by Him upon mankind. No one except Allah has the absolute right to grant and take it away. Protecting life is therefore an act of worship which must be observed by every Muslim. Again, physicians knew that, which raises the questions. All right, the sanctity of life serves as an integral balancing factor in maintaining peace and order in a just society. How one defines death may vary. It's important for clinicians to realize the aspects of a patient's religious beliefs that may directly influence medical care and how such practices may interface with local laws and the determination of death. A search of PublicMed, Scopus, Embase, Web of Science, PsychNet, sociological abstracts, dialogue, etc., was conducted by me to observe this stuff. We talked about a little bit about brain death and whatever. Islam has the concept of ijma. Thank you, Fatmi. Which means the majority of scholars have studied the issue and agreed on a fatwa or a legal decree. In preparing this presentation, I've relied on certain writings and others that aren't listed there. My conclusion is based upon what I believe to be the consensus of opinion as it relates to the definition of death, the ability or recommendation to deny treatment, and overall life support and the end of process. It's permitted for you to make those choices, as I understand it. It's permitted for you to make those choices in consultation with your family, as long as you are competent and your physician is made aware. That's another thing I wanted to just point out. I know now I've got 9 minutes.
8.
8? Okay. With your durable powers of attorney and your living wills, our practice in our office is that we take the name and the address of the primary care physician, and we forward to that individual a copy of the living will and the durable power of attorney signed by the patient. Now, I don't know if this is happening, and maybe the physicians in the room can answer this, but you have this my chart now, and everything's online and such. I don't know if they're taking this document or these documents and putting them on my chart, or if you've got to take one to each individual physician. It becomes important only in the respect that a lot of people live here, travel to Florida, or spend half the year in Arizona, half the year in Florida, and the durable power of attorney may be somewhere else. With my chart, you can you can see it. So maybe you want to check with your physician and see if that is on my chart. All right. What do you mean?
In answer to the my chart, we ask a question, and it's just on file that the patient has a healthcare power of attorney. So just 2 things. One of them is that these conversations developed because of physicians, true, but physicians are trained. We cannot impose our religious belief on the patient. That's extremely, extremely important. And then interacting with that, the statement that Islam forbids abortion is partially inaccurate, because Islam believes, the majority of scholars believe that the ruh or the soul is inserted at age 4 months. And therefore, before that, it is allowed, and it is definitely allowed if the mother's life is in jeopardy. So and it's very important that the physician is not, like, I will not participate. If a patient is pregnant and they want to have an abortion, because my personal belief goes against it, I will not facilitate them. But and there are physicians, Catholics, Christians, who do not believe in end of life at all. And so they have to separate themselves from the care of the patient at that point. So I think it's very important to differentiate that the physician does not impose their religious belief on the patient.
I should have been more clear about that. I appreciate that. But as an injunction there, if you don't believe in abortion, you don't abandon the patient. You make a referral. Correct?
No, I tell them that you're on your own.
Right. Okay.
Thank you. Good talk, because these are issues that we deal with on a daily basis as physicians and as society members. My question is durable power of attorney and living will. Does one under the law trump the other? So I have a lot of patients, this has come up consistently, patients under hospice, they need an RCC, then they need emergency surgery, and the inference from their living will is that they don't want life extension care, but then they have a situation that changes, they need emergency surgery, and then suddenly that's put on hold. And then the other thing is, on the flip side, say, we're non-medical people, and my husband says, I really never want a feeding tube. And I say, okay, we go to the lawyer, no feeding tube. But then he's incapacitated but for a short period of time, and he needs a feeding tube just to get by for a couple weeks, maybe, hopefully. Am I, as durable power of attorney, allowed to say, let's hold on the living will? Well, no. I mean, say, well, even though he said no feeding tube, I understand it's a short-term situation.
Because Sarah cut me short, I thought I had 2 hours to do this.
We can go over.
Next week.
The answer is the living will is your request as a person. The durable power of attorney for healthcare is a designation of another person. All right? So they're not in competition with each other. If one is incompetent but has given you the living will, that declaration is still good. If that person is not competent and you want someone else to make that determination, you would use the durable power of attorney. Okay? Everyone says, who's going to have authority to quote?
Pull the plot.
That's not what we're talking about. All right? The statutes, the law, the community require that 2 physicians say you're in a terminal state. They require that you have medical opinion to justify whatever you're doing. Because the easiest thing to do is to knock somebody out. They need to have a feeding tube. You've got the power of attorney. You say no. And then there's $1 million life insurance policy there. No, it's not as simple as one thinks to do that. It's emotional. It's got legal implications. And I don't think it's a decision any of us want to make.
Thank you very much. I think if you have a question for Jim, let's do it privately after Salah. But I have 2 points to mention. One is that the search committee is extremely active in finding a permanent imam, and we are on the right road. Hopefully, within a week, 2 weeks, a decision will be made to have somebody come here at least for interview and to meet the community. That's one item. The second, I think it concerns all of us, and that is, do we have an imam for Ramadan? Dr. Abdul Wahab shakes his head, meaning yes. So travel arrangements are being made. The imam will come from Al-Azhar. He will be very well educated, and he is expected to do Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr, and Isha, and Maghrib as well. That is sometimes difficult, but that is the program. So please spread the word, because a lot of people are concerned about it, but we want to let everybody know that the permanent Imam search committee is active. The Ramadan search committee is also very active. With that, I thank all of you, and time for prayer. Thank you.